Hi, Dr. Ramos. So, for today's video, I will be showcasing my journal that I have kept this semester, starting with Chapter 1 or Lecture 1. We have Education in a Changing Society. We start with the case study, and then we go into what each, what are they called? Subcategory of the chapter is about. After the notes are complete, I then wrote a reflection here at the bottom. Moving on to Chapter 2, Lecture 2. This chapter seems short, and I did write a reflection, but this was only because at the time that this chapter was done, we finished Chapter 1 in that class, and then we had started Chapter 2, but we didn't finish Chapter 2 that class. Next lecture, we did complete Chapter 2 and start Chapter 3. I then put a reflection for Chapter 2 at the bottom. Moving on to Chapter 3. So once we got into Chapter 3, I started putting definitions. And then we moved on to the rest of the slide notes. At the end of Chapter 3, I included a reflection. Culture is a huge part of a student's identity and should always be considered and integrated within the classroom. One of my favorite things to live by. We then moved on to Chapter 4. These notes may seem a little hard to see through the phone, but in person, I'm able to read them. At the end of Chapter 4, I included a reflection. Moving on to Chapter 5. At the end of Chapter 5, I included a reflection. Moving on to Chapter 6. So at the time of these notes being done, I was actually at a work conference for my job. I work at a daycare and we have to do annual trainings. So at the time that this was done, I only had one pen, and the pen that we were given at the conference, and I had done this at nighttime. So these notes may seem a little bit more sloppier than my past notes, but they were done with the same level of care. just without color. Sorry, my chapter 6 reflection is here at the bottom. Then we move on to chapter 7. I was still over at the work conference. I then included a reflection for the chapter 7 notes. We then move on to chapter 8. We are back to colored notes. By the time that we have reached the 8th chapter, I believe this is whenever I started with the definitions first, and then moved on to the book notes. I included my chapter 8 reflection here at the bottom. We then move on to chapter 9 with the definitions on top and the book notes to follow. Oh, my reflection is here at the bottom for chapter 9. We then move on to chapter 10 and lecture 10. My reflection for chapter 10, which was also one of the shorter chapters, is here at the bottom. Moving on to chapter 11, lecture 11, creating developmentally appropriate classrooms. We began with my definitions and then moved on to book notes. I then wrote my reflection here at the bottom. Moving on to chapter 12, lecture 12, creating inclusive classrooms, the ability-disability continuum, and health dimension. Although I did have colored pens, they had already begun to run out since I'd been using them for several years already. So I stuck with the black pen that I got at the conference, I'm sorry. And my reflection is here at the bottom for chapter 11. Or I think that was chapter 12, I'm so sorry. Oh, chapter 12, I'm sorry. And some more reflection notes. And then we move on to the last chapter, chapter 13, the classroom as a global community. We began with definitions and then moved on to the book notes. At this point, I had acquired a pink pen. However, my reflection stayed in black. And here is my reflection for the last chapter. And this is my book journal for diverse populations. Thank you.